What up? I got some maintenance checks that you probably forget about all the time if you ride a sport bike. But before we get into that, I've been looking for Motonosity. He hasn't posted in a long time. I'm kind of worried about him. Somebody do a wellness check on his ass. Brent, you in here, Brent? Brent, you in here, bro? Brent, where you at, bro? God damn it. You hiding in the freezer? Brent, you in here? Yeah, I looked everywhere. I couldn't find him. I looked in my microwave, the closet, the garbage. Adobonosity, we miss you, bro. I mean, Motonosity. Alright, so one of the most overlooked areas of your sport bike is always the steering head. If you've ever seen those speed wobble videos, a lot of the times the causes for that is the front end. Sometimes it's low front tire pressure, sometimes it's your wheel bearings, sometimes it's incorrect suspension setting, and sometimes it's faulty head bearings. There's two common types of head bearings. There's the regular ball bearing type, and then there's the roll bearing type, which is a lot more common now. A really quick way to check your head bearings is to roll it forward, hit the brake, and bounce it back and forth like this. What you're trying to feel is lateral movement in the forks, forward and backward, which doesn't necessarily mean you have bad head bearings. You may just need to tighten these adjusters right below your triple tree. Another thing you're gonna wanna do is roll it forward slowly and move the handlebars fully left to right like this. By moving the bike forward, you're making it easy for you to turn the bar left and right. And what you're looking for is like a gritty feeling or tightness when you turn it. When you're turning your handlebars, it should be nice and smooth. An easier way to do this would be to have your bike on a stand, and you can move the bars side to side, give it a nice tug back and forth. The lateral movement should feel tight and the bearings should feel smooth. Next thing you're gonna do is inspect your chain. A lot of y'all probably clean your chain, but you never check the O-rings. It can be a little tedious, but all you do is spin the tire and use a light, and what you're looking for is cracked or split O-rings. If your chain is fairly new and you find one or two split rings, you could easily just replace those rings. If you're balling on a budget, links and rings are pretty cheap, but honestly, if you have a ton of split rings, just replace the chain and sprockets now. Okay, while you're here, check your front sprocket bolt. I've had a bike come back from the dealer and this was hand tight. Luckily, I check everything after the dealership has my bike, and that's part of the reason I run without the sprocket cover. Now, if you do run with the cover, make sure to pull this off and clean it out. As you can see, my bike still has the chain guard. A lot of people have been confusing my cover being off or my chain guard being off. The chain guard is built into the block on my bike. While you're down here, check this kickstand. The kickstand shouldn't get stuck in the middle like this. That means there's a lot of grip built up in here. And what you can do is unbolt it and clean it using brake cleaner or WD-40 if you prefer. But it should just flick up. Nice and easy. Mine's still a little bit hesitant and it'll get stuck right here in the middle. It shouldn't do that. If you're running a case cover like this bike, pull it off periodically and clean out all the debris. Especially if you ride a lot of street, you'll get pebbles and crap like that in here pretty easily. And I've heard of people cracking their cases because they don't clean out the debris that's in there. All right, this one's super important. Check your radiator hoses. And if you have an oil cooler, check the oil cooler hose as well. These crimp style clamps are known to fail. They're pretty fucking trash, as well as these spring style clamps. On my Ducati, I run regular hose clamps, the type that you can tighten. They're a lot more reliable than the crap that's on my Aprilia, so if you want to change those out, yeah, I'd go ahead and do that. Okay, so this next one is about checking your wheel bearings. Basically, you want to get the bike up on a stand, take about 1 or 2 fingers, and move the wheel. Just like this, and listen and try to feel for grittiness inside the bearings. Make a couple passes, and then hold the top and bottom, and do a little wiggle. If you don't feel any movement, you're good. If you feel some movement, your wheel bearings are likely done. If your mid-pipe and your muffler is easily removable, you can clean out the soot that's inside these pipes. It's something very common that a lot of racers do, is clean out the inside of their exhaust, especially after a race, and especially if you're running race fuel. The idea is that it keeps the exhaust flow as unrestricted as possible. Another thing you're gonna wanna do is periodically take off the tank, unplug the fuel lines, and check the valve cover gaskets for any seeps or leaks. If you've been following this channel for a while, you know I just had an O-ring leak, which is pretty common in this motor, and I am pretty anal about the bikes that I'm currently riding, not so much the bikes that I'm not riding, because I want my bike to be safe when I'm out on the road or at the track. Okay, so one of the biggest ones that everybody misses is the caliper pistons. These should be cleaned out and inspected quite often, because they could seize on you. It happened to a friend of mine, and I used to not check these, but his caliper pistons seized on the freeway, and honestly, I didn't even know that was a thing. Check your caliper pistons and clean them out. If you have an aluminum gas tank, this may not apply to you, but look inside your tank and checked for rust, especially if you have a steel tank. This normally won't happen on a bike that you ride often, more so for bikes that you let sit for a long time. Condensation will build up inside the tank, and water is known to corrode metal. Luckily, I have a composite tank on my Aprilia, and every now and then I'll just have to let the pressure off, because sometimes the lines that are supposed to relieve pressure inside the tank don't always work. Alright, here's a pro tip. Every single motorcycle has some sort of fuse box in it with spares. Mine just happens to be right under the tank. And as you can see, mine are all full. These top 3 are all spares. This is my starter relay. You can tell it's a starter relay because of these 2 big gauged wires hooked up to it. And personally, I would carry a spare starter relay just in case your bike wants to short that relay. You don't want to be stuck in the middle of nowhere during a ride because your bike won't start. Of course, you could always push start it, but yeah, I'd carry extra fuses and an extra relay if I were going on like a long trip. But this is obviously not the bike for that. And then one of the last ones I would do is like do a visual inspection, try to touch like the bolts that you can see just to make sure they're all tight and not loose, especially like fairing bolts. These things come loose all the time. I actually found one during this video that was loose, so just make sure everything's kind of snug. You don't want fairings flying off this shit when you're riding down the highway, or especially if you're at the track. And if you're not a complete idiot, I'll show you how to safety wire your motorcycle so you don't lose things like mufflers on the freeway, or like the smaller pinch bolts that are on your forks that don't necessarily need a ton of torque. Mine requires 10 Newton meters, which is like 5 foot-pounds or so. And this rear nut actually doesn't lock. It just has the crush washer right in between the nut and the axle block. But yeah, loose bolts, check them. That's all I got.